Cool. So yesterday we talked a little bit about our identity and how a lot of what we would consider our identity is actually things that we've taken on either from our upbringing, our external circumstances, social media, societal influence, and etc. And we talked about how our identity isn't necessarily the truth of our identity doesn't lie within these labels or descriptions that we choose to take on. So the truth of our identity really is moment by moment. It's made up of our choices, it's made up of our energy, and it can fluctuate and change without affecting our worth. And so I gave you some journaling prompts yesterday about how you define your worth, how you view yourself, what your identity is. So if you have not done those, I do encourage you to go back and do the homework. Not only will you get extra entries if you feel called to comment and let me know that you have done so, but like I was telling my husband, I really believe that the value and the main part of the energy is just held within the homework. There's so much transformation that happens from just observing your own inner workings. Whether you're just sitting down and asking yourself, how do I feel today? What are my emotions? What do I feel in my body? That can be a really good centering moment to just witness that and take account of these things. So if you're not familiar with journaling, or if you're a little intimidated with journaling, I definitely encourage you to give it a shot, because I think that it is very valuable. And yeah, I could talk about journaling all night, but I do want to get started because my intention is to keep these fairly short. That way we can all, be with our families and continue with our lives. Tonight, we're going to go over boundaries and beliefs. So yeah, I'm just going to dive right in. If anybody has questions while I'm talking, you can go ahead and comment them, and I will check in as I go. And if anybody has comments or questions either on the replay or at the end of the video, you can ask me that as well. I do ask that if you are replay to tag me, because sometimes Facebook just doesn't show me all the comments. So yeah, it's been frustrating, but I have been coming back in to check just in case anybody has had questions. Cool. So the main thing that I wanted to talk about tonight is how boundaries can seem difficult when we are questioning our self-worth, or when we're struggling with our self-worth. Like I said yesterday, our worth does not change, but sometimes our viewpoints or our beliefs about our own worth will change. In association with identity, we might believe that we're not worthy of a break if we didn't do all of the dishes, or you might believe we're not worthy of love if we don't bend over backwards to help so-and-so. So tonight we're going to talk about how our worth affects our initiation of boundaries. And boundaries are really just a way of showing your self-respect. So when we fail to set or uphold clear boundaries, we are putting another person's needs or desires before our own. And I know at one point before I really understood the value of boundaries, sorry, before I understood the value of boundaries, I thought, well, doesn't that make me selfish? If I don't put somebody else's needs and desires before my own, that means I'm putting my own before theirs. And that doesn't feel right. And so I really had to sit with that and understand that putting my own needs and even my own desires before that of somebody else does not make me selfish. It means that I am respecting and honoring myself. Because a lot of times our boundaries are saying no to specific things, or letting somebody know that We won't tolerate the way that they were either treating us, talking to us, treating our stuff, things like that. And that doesn't mean you're disrespecting that person. That means you're telling them, you cannot disrespect me in this way because I'm respecting myself. And it's not always necessarily a disrespectful thing on their part. Like that might not be their intention. But say somebody was to ask you, goodness, I just lost my train of thought. If somebody would ask you if you could come to a function an hour early and help out with setup or bring extra food or whatever, and you have a full schedule, you could technically do it, but you would just be maxed out, completely stressed, and it would be difficult. It's not disrespectful of them to ask, but it would be disrespectful of yourself to say yes. So when you say no, not only are you honoring yourself in your time and your energy, you are also honoring them, because then they have the opportunity to ask somebody who is better suited for that task. So boundaries protect our energy, and they honor our values. Boundaries really are the ultimate form of self-care. They come in many varieties. Boundaries aren't always necessarily saying no to something, but they always honor your time, energy, needs, and desires. So setting boundaries with others, this could look like saying no, especially in the example that I just gave. Setting boundaries with others might just let them know, I'm going to do dishes on Tuesday nights and you have to do them on Thursday nights. It could be telling someone how to better respect you or the relationship. Boundaries do require an element of open communication, especially when dealing with another party. So if you really don't like being touched without notice, if you don't like spontaneous hugs or etc., it would be disrespectful of the other person to do that. But if you never tell them, they don't know that they're disrespecting you. They don't know that that bothers you. So setting a boundary in that way really respects you and this other party. So instead of sitting there quietly resenting this person because they keep touching you without your permission, you can tell them, actually, I really would prefer if you asked, because it makes me feel uncomfortable in my body when you touch me without letting me know first. So that way you are honored and respected, and it sets them up for success. And I think that is really, really important, especially within our close personal relationships. But this can apply to your work environment or friendships and all of our relationships. I also wrote down time boundaries. So time boundaries within work could be setting your hours for Monday through Friday. My boundary is that I don't work weekends. Or spending 2 hours on an event. So if you have an event on Thursday, but you have to wake up early on Friday, you have to get to bed at a certain time or you're going to be tired the next day. So that is a boundary that you're setting with yourself and also with others, letting them know that I respect my time and energy, so I'm only going to be here for 2 hours. I think also it is important that if you set these boundaries with yourself or others, that you follow up with them. So if somebody crosses the boundary, gently remind them. And then if it becomes habitual, that's just an indicator of how they respect you and the relationship. But it is important that you continue to, I don't want to use the word enforce because it feels negative, but just the reminder that the boundary is still in place. So this also doesn't mean that there will be firm boundaries, and then there will also be soft boundaries. So there might be a boundary in your relationship where I do the dishes on Tuesday and my partner does dishes on Thursday, but if my partner's under the weather, if they're really stressed at work, if something happens, I'm going to do the dishes on Thursday. And I will most likely not resent my partner for it because I chose to alter our boundary temporarily. So just noticing what feels right to you within your own energy and how you want that to be represented in your world. So I thought this was a really good example. If we have kids, I think a lot of us in the group do have kids, and if not, you were once a child, so you probably have some experience with this, but when we're parents and we set boundaries with our kids all the time, and it's really easy to set boundaries with kids. We don't think anything of it. Some of the main boundaries I have with my children are their sugar intake and their television intake, and also how messy I will allow certain things to become. And another big one for us is how long they're allowed to go between baths. So there might be times that, especially if they're playing out in the dirt, it's summertime and they get really gross, we'll take a bath every night. There are other times that they might go 2 or 3 days between baths, but I have young children, so there are times that they will still refuse, even though they love bath time. So they'll say, no, 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 I'm not taking a bath, and they try to refuse. Then I can say, okay, you can skip tonight, but tomorrow you have to. And those are really easy boundaries to make because we have set ourselves up to be the authority. We recognize ourselves as the authority in this situation. So when it comes to you and your life, you are ultimately the authority. A lot of times when we're growing up, we never make the distinction between, oh, my parents were the authority, my school teachers were the authority, all these other authority figures in our life. When we become an adult, we just transfer those positions to other people, and we're never clearly taught to define ourselves as the authority of our own lives, at least many of us anyways. So I was raised in a extremely Christian household. I don't know how else to say that, but they were very strict and ingrained in religion, I guess. So a lot of the stereotypical beliefs about husband and wife were really pressed upon me during my childhood. So subconsciously, even though outwardly I believed in all these feminist values and that, we're equal and we can have an equal household with balance, in a lot of ways, I transferred the position of authority to my husband, or I transferred it onto a boss at work, which your boss has a certain amount of authority, but only over work, not over your life. Because ultimately, nobody has authority over you except for yourself. It all comes down to your decision. Because nobody can make you do anything except for you. So somebody might try to persuade you. They might try to encourage you with incentives, or they might try to offer up consequences. So if you don't do this for me, I'm going to throw a fit, be angry, take this away, whatever. Or they might try to manipulate you emotionally by making you feel guilty, afraid, shameful, any of the other manipulative emotions that some try to coax us into following their will, doing things their way. But ultimately, no matter what, you have the final say. You get to decide. And this is true even with children, even though we do have the authority in a lot of ways, there are times that you can't make a child. It is ultimately their decision. So boundaries become a lot easier. Self-worth becomes a little bit easier to claim and own and embody when we recognize ourselves as the authority of our own lives. When we claim the self-authority, we begin to set boundaries without fear or guilt. We can operate from a place of self-respect and compassion. Because when we're our own authority, we're no longer putting the responsibility of discipline or expectation on another figure in our life. So, as I was sharing yesterday, I had a lot of beliefs around what a good wife and mother looked like, um, even though within my own household they weren't true. So I had this idea that if I did not perfectly perform my wifely and motherly duties, then my husband would get mad at me, or that my husband was setting expectations for the household. Which is really funny because my husband is extremely laid back and supportive, and he does not care. So I was setting these own expectations on myself, but I was projecting them onto the authority figure of my life, because I wasn't ready to claim responsibility. I wasn't ready to claim ownership and authority. So I really had to dig into some of these concepts and see how they sat within my own energy, and not only um, where I wanted to be, where I wanted to take ownership and authority, where I wanted to drop some of the beliefs around the structures I had set up, but also where I was. I had to get really honest with myself so that I could break down those barriers, those identities, those beliefs, so that I could get clear on what my truth was and how to build up from there. Um, so setting boundaries with yourself. I really kind of struggled to come up with a lot of examples for this because a lot of them in my own world are time-based or care-based. So as someone who is a nurturer and a caregiver, I put a lot of emphasis on the ones that I love, and I love to take care of them. Sometimes I forget to take care of myself. So some of my boundaries are setting aside a little bit of time each week to have a self-care date with myself. Dorshane said I had to turn my phone off. Oh no. I was having technical issues today too. I, I was trying to upload something to Instagram, and I had to completely update my phone like 6 times. Oh my goodness. It was crazy. Um, So, setting boundaries with yourself is also a form of self care. In the example I just gave, it is specifically around self care, but it can also be about self discipline. So, this could be going to bed at a certain time, waking up at a certain time, setting up your own routine or schedule for how you want to live your life. Um, Something I have started to do with the seasons is to adjust our routines. So with fall, we added schooling to our routine within my house. And we also had to adjust our outside times because in the summer we go out really early and typically um, either before or after dinner because those are the cooler times. And now that the temperature is dropping, we go out in the afternoon because it is warmer. So I had to adjust our schedule. Um, and so those are boundaries that I set with our time allotments. So these are things that you can set for yourself as an aspect of self boundaries and self care. Um, Setting up these boundaries within yourself can be ways of preventing self-sabotage. Like I mentioned, self-discipline. So if there's something that you really want to honor, like if you really want to go to school to learn something for your education or for your potential career or etc., that is going to require discipline and boundaries, because not only are you going to have to set time boundaries, but you're going to have to um, set up boundaries about when you do your homework, how you do your homework, the level of work that you find acceptable. Um, but ultimately, they should honor your time, your energy, and your needs and desires. So I think a lot of setting up boundaries with yourself or with others really comes down to, what do you need? What do you desire? I know I've talked about that fairly often, but I don't think we ask ourselves that enough. It has become a practice of mine when I become overwhelmed or just stressed, fearful, anything that throws off my alignment. I will sit and ask myself, okay, what do I need right now? What do I desire right now? And a lot of times it is, I need a moment to breathe. I need to care for myself. I want to feel supported. Things like that. And then you just are able to stop the overwhelm in its tracks and say, oh, the overwhelm is a symptom of a need not being met. And so your boundaries offer a way to meet those needs. And if this is a routine thing, you meet those needs before those alarms go off. So before the stress is too much, before the overwhelm comes in. And I really think, especially as we're moving into these new timelines and as we're adjusting our lives, these are really important things to get clear on, because a lot of things are accelerating within our world. A lot of shifts are happening, and it's just going to help you navigate the outer world more when this internal stuff is already laid out for you. Cool. So something I did want to touch on a little more was that boundaries don't always have to imply restriction. A lot of times boundaries can be no. And if you're not experienced with setting boundaries, I encourage you to start with a simple no. It can be very empowering. So, boundaries can also refer to clear guidelines or expectations. Like in the example of dishes, I'll do dishes on Tuesday, you do dishes on Thursday. That is a boundary. It lets my partner know, this is what I expect of you. That way, when my partner doesn't do dishes for 3 weeks, I'm not sitting there resenting them and they have no idea why I'm mad. So boundaries set up yourself for success. They set up the other people for success. And it honors everyone's energy. It shows respect for all parties involved. The boundaries that we initiate can protect others from confusion, resentment, and miscommunication. Think of boundaries as a pathway for healthy relationships. My cat wants to be center of the show. But yeah, boundaries can really, I think boundaries are necessary for healthy relationships. But if you aren't really sure what a healthy relationship looks like, I know that I wasn't sure what a healthy relationship looked like. Boundaries can be a really important place to start. I did have a situation not too long ago where I don't know if triggered is quite the right word, but a situation came up in my world and it irritated me. There was aspects of it that I didn't understand at first, and I didn't understand why I found it so agitating. So I sat with it for a few days, and finally I realized that the other person had failed to initiate boundaries, so I was unclear of their expectations. So they were sitting there resenting me, talking about me in a certain way, and I had no idea that they desired that or that they wanted that. So that was a situation where I would have benefited from clear boundaries being initiated. We feel comfortable initiating boundaries when we believe we're worthy of them. A lot of times when we don't initiate boundaries, it is a form of people pleasing. We're afraid of what they will think or feel if we do not say yes. If we just give in to, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. If we don't initiate these boundaries and respect them, it's just allowing them to take advantage, even though that might not be their intention. So people pleasing can be helped with setting of boundaries. So for the homework, I wanted you guys to ask yourselves. I think yesterday we asked what we defined as worthiness, how we viewed our own worthiness. I'm just going to look. Yes, how do you define your worth? That was yesterday's question. So tonight's question is, what beliefs do you hold around worthiness? Oops. This cat, oh my goodness. Yeah, so yesterday was how do you define worthiness, and tonight is what are your beliefs around worthiness? I know I shared in the last workshop we did in here a little quick way to rewrite your beliefs. So as you're writing down any of the things that come up around worthiness, anything that comes up around your beliefs on boundaries, write them down, look at them, because then you're able to shift them. So I would like for you to write them down, whatever they are, and then if you feel called to, cross out the ones that don't resonate, the ones that you don't want to keep, the ones that don't support your energy and your time and your needs and your desires. Cross them out and write down one that feels better, something that allows you to shift it emotionally. So our beliefs around worthiness. I believe I touched on this a little bit yesterday, but there's a lot within society standards that dictate what makes us worthy. Especially, there's a lot of women in the group, especially around being a female and what it means to be a woman and the worthiness of a woman. There's so much that society has. So I think that this is a well that you can touch on now and then come back to as you're called, because this is just a taste, and I want you guys to just really get comfortable with diving into some of this work. And if you're comfortable, go ahead and go as deep as you want. But something that I am opening up is my one-to-one coaching. So I am available to support those who want to go really deep with some of this work. So tonight, what beliefs do you hold around worthiness, and what beliefs do you hold around boundaries? I keep losing my train of thought. It's been a very rainy, cool day here, so we're all in like a very cozy mood. It always makes me sleepy. Yes, our beliefs around worthiness are often a reflection of what we're shown within society and within our families. So my grandmother was my caretaker, my mother figure, and she worked really hard. She wanted to take good care of us and she wanted to provide for us. So I saw her doing nonstop work. I didn't see a lot of self-care, and I saw a lot of burnout. And so when I grew up, without even realizing it, I mirrored that in my own world. And so, like I was talking about my beliefs around what a good wife meant, what a good mother meant, I had to really dig into that and understand that even though I held those beliefs were not aligned with me. They were not my truth. It was just what I was operating from. So when we recognize that, we then have the power to shift them into beliefs and patterns and actions that align with our values, align with our truths, and honor ourselves. Eloisa says, this is a great topic. Before I felt empowered to set boundaries in my relationships, I thought it would hurt them and push people away. I can now say I not only have kept and improved relationships with those I love and love me back, but I have been able to take notice of the people who do not really love and respect me. It has been a great experience for me. Yes, I 100% agree. It is definitely a topic that I am still expounding on. I even told my husband, I think it's kind of funny that I'm talking about this because it doesn't seem like very long ago that I didn't have firm boundaries. And now that I do, even boundaries with myself on how I will allow others to treat me, it has really shown me a lot within myself and within my relationships. It also has helped my relationships, like Louisa said. My relationship with my husband has deepened and grown because we now feel comfortable to set these boundaries and to communicate in this manner. And it has really opened up a pathway for forgiveness and for just compassion. And I think that's wonderful. So I will put a couple of journaling prompts in the description as I did yesterday, but the main one I want you to do is, what beliefs do you hold around worthiness, and what beliefs do you hold around boundaries? And cross out the ones that don't feel good and replace it with one that does feel good. So the next question is, where can you recognize your worth? Something that I did in, I guess, my early stages of this work was there were areas where I didn't feel worthy. So I might not have felt worthy of taking a break, but I could see how I deserved to take a break, if that makes sense. So for me, that energy was a little different. I deserved to rest because I had worked really hard. I deserved to spend time with my husband because whatever it was. So worthiness and deserve felt different to me. So if they do, you can play with that a little bit. But where can you recognize your worth now? And then the last question I wrote down was, where are you craving boundaries? Or where could you benefit from boundaries? And if you already have boundaries in place, are there any that need to be shifted? Are there any that need to be strengthened? Or are there boundaries that you're holding that don't serve you? So that is for people who already are familiar with boundaries. And I believe that is all that I had for tonight. Yeah, I think so. That feels good. So if you were here with me live, make sure you comment. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay.